This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. One man wages war against an entire town in an unflinching exploration of war, obedience, and trauma. It's First Blood, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. This is another one of our patron Academy Award winner requests. We're doing First Blood, as you heard in the intro. We wanted to give a shout out to the person who requested this movie and book combo, and that is our $15 patron, Gratch, just Gratch, over on Patreon. Appreciate you supporting us, and we're happy to get to your request. If you want to support us, you can go to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us for $2, $5, or $15 a month, and you get different things depending on the levels. But like we mentioned, at the $15 level, you get priority recommendations. Gratch recommended this a while ago. Like we don't get right to, it's not the next one on our list. We got stuff kind of planned out, but we figure out somewhere to work it in sooner rather than later, and we've done a few of them now. And yeah, that's why we're doing First Blood, and I'm glad we did, because neither of us had seen this movie, and you hadn't read the book, and now we're both better for having done so. We're more learned, more read, and more watched. We have all of our normal segments in this episode, literally every single one. That's a rarity. I don't know if it's a rarity, but I think it's a rarity to have every single one. A lot of times we're missing one or the other, and blah, blah, blah. But let's get to our first segment. Let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
So, if you haven't seen First Blood, or it's been a long time, I'm going to give a brief rundown of the plot. It's kind of just a refresher, or if you've never seen it at all and you have no interest in seeing it and you want to kind of be able to follow along as we're discussing some of the stuff and not feel completely lost. This, I assume these are similar enough that there's going to be points where they diverge, obviously. I know the ending in particular, but overall, the storylines are similar enough.
Yeah, they're similar enough.
That we're just going to do one summation here, one summary. And so I'll jump into that real quick before we get to Guess Who. So, Rambo is a Vietnam War vet who is traveling along the West Coast in the movie. Where he's traveling is not super important necessarily. At least it doesn't seem to be. Maybe a little bit in the movie. We'll talk about that. But he's traveling. Vietnam War vet who's back from the war. He's traveling. He ends up in a town. He's just looking for a friend. Well, whether or not that's in the book, maybe we'll get to. But he's just he's kind of just wandering around. He ends up in this town, wants to find a place to eat. The local sheriff, Teasel, picks him up, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing around here?" And he goes, "Oh, nothing." And instantly, the sheriff does not like him because he's got a vagrant look about him, and the sheriff doesn't want any of that in his town, his good, quiet little town. They like it quiet. So he picks him up and says, "Oh yeah, you can get something to eat. You just go a couple hours down the road." Drops him off at the edge of town. Rambo's like, "Screw that. I'm eating here. There's no law against me eating here." And so he walks back into town. The sheriff sees him. There's a confrontation, and the sheriff arrests him. And then this moment sparks, we find out, some PTSD as he's being booked into the police station for vagrancy and resisting arrest and all these things. To his Vietnam days where he was a prisoner of war, and this causes some flashbacks and, like I said, some PTSD triggering type of things happen. He ends up breaking out of the prison, fighting all the guards, going on the run, and into the woods, basically getting chased, and then he disappears into in the movie the Washington woods, I believe, or Oregon. I think it's Washington. And they basically send out a huge party of people after him because this sheriff really doesn't like him and won't let him just, disappear. He's got to go get him. And Rambo proceeds to take out, in differing ways in the movie and the book, but we'll get to that, take out all of his pursuers. It turns out he's a very accomplished Green Beret in the movie. He's a Green Beret that was in the Vietnam War, and he's specialized in guerrilla warfare and that sort of thing. So he's very good at sort of fighting in bad odds and in the woods and in the suck, as they would call it, I think, back in Nam. I'm pretty sure. if Forrest Gump didn't lie to me, which we'll get to eventually. He ends up taking all these guys out. And then they send more and more people. The Army Reserves show up, and it's this big struggle between Rambo and all of these authoritarian figures. And then it leads to a final confrontation in the movie. We'll get into the differences between him and Teasel, and eventually him and his old general from Vietnam. And Rambo sort of breaks down and explains that he doesn't, fit in anywhere anymore. He doesn't know how to do anything. He was a specialized killing machine, and now he's what does he do now? And it's a very brutal and sort of crushing look into the mind of somebody who's been at war and that sort of thing. And in the way it ends differs, and we'll get to that, like I said, between the movie and the book. But that's the rough. There's an ending to the story there after he has gone to war with this town, and it ends a couple different ways, depending on the medium. So, that's roughly the story. Let's get into the game show portion. Guess who?
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
So we have 4 descriptions this time of various characters.
Okay.
So our first one here, short and chunky, wrinkles around his eyes and shallow pockmarks in his cheeks that gave him a grain like weathered board. Top button of his shirt open, tie loose, the front of his shirt soaked dark with sweat.
Short and chunky, wrinkles around his eyes, shallow pockmarks in his cheek that gave him a... He's wearing a tie, front of his shirt soaked with sweat. The short and chunky makes me lead to believe that may be Teasel, however you pronounce the sheriff's name. Because I believe Sylvester Stallone, I believe Rambo's rather short, but I wouldn't describe him as chunky. He's very muscular and fit. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's particularly tall. I don't actually know for sure, but I think he's not super tall. But chunky wouldn't make sense for what is about to happen for the rest of the story of him running through the mountains forever and, being a super war machine. So I'm going to guess it's not Rambo, although some of the other elements could dependingly fit with the top shirt open, and he wouldn't be wearing a tie, so it doesn't make sense. But he could be sweaty because he's been traveling. Who knows? But I'm going to say that that's Teasel because he probably wears the tie as the sheriff.
Yes. It is.
Okay. Is his name Teasel in the...
Yes.
Okay.
Sylvester Stallone, in case anyone is now wondering, is 5'10", according to the internet.
I thought he wasn't super... that's not short or anything, but
yeah.
I didn't think he was particularly tall.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so that was Teasel, which was how I was saying it when I was reading the book.
Yeah, Teasel, I could see either way, yeah.
So our next one then, he had a long, heavy beard, and his hair was hanging down over his ears to his neck. He wore mud-crusted boots, rumpled jeans ripped at the cuffs and patched on one thigh, a blue sweatshirt speckled with what looked like dry blood, and a buckskin jacket.
Okay, well this, so the main difference here that we see, I'm assuming that this is Rambo based on, I wish Stallone had a beard. That would have been cool if Rambo had a freaking beard. But I can say fucking because this is no way. If you're watching this, if you watched First Blood, you're old enough to hear the F. They say it several times in the movie. The movie's rated R. But I think that would have to be Rambo. Like I said, I'm going to be disappointed that he doesn't have a beard. The longer hair, the jeans that are kind of, the muddy shoes. He got the look of somebody who's well-traveled and that a sheriff seeing walking through his town may think, and he's got, apparently blood on his shirt, may think he's up to no good or something if he's profiling. So I'm going to say that's Rambo.
That is Rambo.
There you go.
And to me, aside from the beard, one of the biggest differences is that he's not wearing an army jacket.
That was the other thing I was going to get to. I got sidetracked on the beard, but that was the other thing I was going to get to is that he's not wearing any sort of fatigues, which in the movie he has an army jacket, his old Vietnam army jacket of some sort that he's wearing, which immediately signals him as a vet.
Yes.
But yeah, those are the two big differences, the beard and the jacket. So,
All right, up next. The top of his head was shiny bald, white hair on both sides. He had his glasses and a nylon green jacket, green denim pants, high-laced field boots.
I'm trying to think of other people this could be. I think this probably makes most sense as his glasses and green. I think this guy had a green jacket and green denim pants or green pants, I think. And he was bald, I believe. And this is the guy who dies in the movie. I don't remember his name. He's some other police officer.
The really mean one?
The really mean one who tries to shoot. He's on the helicopter and he tries to shoot Rambo a few times. Galt, yeah, I believe that is. And then he ends up falling out of the helicopter and dying in the movie. I assume that this is him.
This is not him.
Okay.
This is Orval, who's the old man that brings the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Who's a much bigger character in the book than he is in the movie.
Okay, because I was like, he's not in the movie very much.
No, he's not.
And he's wearing I think he's wearing I don't know if he's wearing green. I think he's wearing like a blue denim jacket with like a lambskin or like a
he kind of looks like a stereotypical like an Irish like farmer, like in the movies where he's got like the lambskin jacket and like a little hat.
Yeah, he's got the little hat. He kind of looks like the stereotypical character that would have bloodhounds in a movie. He looks like the character that he is. Maybe that's because characters are based on him. I don't actually know. Of the guy who has who the police call in with the dogs to go find the criminal. He looks like that character.
Yeah,
and so maybe he's based on that character, or other of those characters are based on him from this movie. I'm not sure, but. A little bit different there, because the green, all green. I think what's his name, Galt or whatever he said.
I think he has on like that kind of olive,
or is it like
police,
almost like vaguely police, vaguely military colors. Yeah,
that like olivey tan color.
That's what I was thinking when I saw green, but sure. Yep. Okay, so first one wrong. Oh well.
All right, last one. His uniform molded perfectly to his body, not a fold or a wrinkle. In the dark, his skin seemed the color of lead. He had short black hair combed straight back, a thin face, a sharp chin.
I'm going to assume, because this person's in uniform, one of the only main characters, the only character we see in uniform that isn't like a police officer. When you say uniform, I'm assuming military. The only one we see in like a dress uniform that this would make sense with is Troutman, I believe is his name, which is the old general, Rambo's old general from Nam.
It is Troutman.
Yeah, I figured.
So 3 for 4.
Not too bad.
Yeah, not bad.
Pretty straightforward. And I think the one I missed could have it makes sense either way. But oh well, 3 for 4, not too bad. All right, we're gonna move on and really get into the meat and bones of it and talk. I'm gonna ask the question. Is that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So, we're gonna try to get through this kind of quick because we have a lot to talk about later. I have a lot of questions here, and this could take a long time. But I think we're gonna discuss a lot of this. Certain elements of this we'll definitely discuss more in Better in the Book, Better in the Movie, and that sort of thing. So, first off, the movie opens up and we jump right in with the fact that this is not going to be a fun movie necessarily. It's not. That was one of the things that I realized after watching this, and I think I knew it going in, but in general, as like cultural idea, I didn't realize this was such a depressing movie.
Yeah. Until
I like read a little bit more about it in preparation for the prequel and stuff, and then knowing what I did of finding out about the book and stuff, and then I realized, oh, this isn't, like I said, I said in the prequel that my idea of this movie was that it's like Predator, but in the woods or like in America, and like the bad guys of the government. That's, kind of, but not at all in the sense that Predator is like a fun action movie. It's a horror movie, action movie, but it's like a fun.
It is really.
And this is not.
No, this is not fun, and it is interesting, I think, and we can talk about it more later if you want to. For me, like, only knowing about this character through like cultural osmosis, the way that this character has been mythologized. Because it's not at all like what we see in this movie.
And I think that's a result, if I had to guess. Now, I said I've seen one of the sequels, I think, but I saw it in like high school. And like the one that came out in 2008 or whatever. I think I went and saw it like in high school or right after high school or whatever, and I don't remember anything about it. My guess is that sort of cultural mythology about Rambo, quote unquote, and why nobody remembers that this movie is called First Blood is because they remember the character Rambo, and I think a lot of that comes from the later movies, which I want to talk about later because I have a whole note about the idea of even making more movies after this one about this character is wild.
It was super wild.
We'll talk about it. So I think that's where that comes from, and not at all from this movie. Yeah. And it's also why nobody remembers that this movie's called First Blood and not Rambo, because people remember Rambo. They don't remember John Rambo from First Blood, is my guess. At least most people. Obviously, people who see and love this movie. It's a very popular movie, but the cultural idea of Rambo. So does the book start the same way? Because in the movie, he walks into town, he finds this house, he's looking for an old war buddy of his, and he goes to this house and he asks if he's there, and the woman is very short with him at first, and then explains that no, he died of cancer. His war buddy died of cancer that he got from Agent Orange in the war. Mm-hmm. And so it's immediately just like devastating and awful. And it's a great filmmaking because it immediately puts you, and Sylvester Stallone does a great job with it. You're immediately very sympathetic to Rambo's character. Is that how the book starts? No,
we don't get any of that at the beginning of the book. The book starts out with Rambo basically trying to hitchhike at a gas station. We don't even know that he's a vet until like a few chapters in.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that's we'll get to it. Does the sheriff immediately hate him and immediately take him to the edge of town and kick him out? And then on top of that, does Rambo immediately, upon being kicked out of town, go, screw this, and just like walk back in, and that's when the confrontation happens? Because I thought that was interesting and not what I was expecting, how I was expecting the sort of inciting incident to play out, to be so like quick and like just like abrupt, in the sense of like he drops him off at the edge of town, and then Rambo walks back in, and the sheriff just sees him. Like, I was expecting like the sheriff to drive away, he walks back in, and then later the sheriff runs into him at the diner or something and is like, hey, I thought, like, that's what I was expecting. It was just interesting to me that it was so abrupt. Is that what happens in the book?
Kind of. That is what happens. He does like drive him out of town, and Rambo like turns back around and walks back into town.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more to it that I want to talk about in one of my segments.
Okay, cool. Next question. Does Rambo have a big fuck-off knife?
No, he doesn't have any weapons to start out with.
Wild.
He gains all of his weaponry.
I was cheating on this one. I knew this because when I was doing my movie research, I found this note. But I had to ask because I thought that's interesting, because it is one of the most well-known sort of Rambo characteristics is his big Bowie knife thing, survival knife that he has that he unscrews. It has he has like a compass. It has a compass in the stock, and and it has the only other thing I think we see specifically. I think it might have matches. I don't remember how he lights he might either have a lighter or he may have matches in there. I know a lot of times survival knives come with matches. I don't know if it did or not. But the other thing we for sure see is that he has like a needle and thread, which is how he sews himself up later in the movie. But he doesn't have it in the book. It's interesting because it did this movie and made that particular knife super popular.
Yeah.
Because of this film, which I thought was interesting. But it's not in the book. Does Rambo start having PTSD flashbacks after he's arrested? He's being booked into the station, and he starts having these flashbacks to being a POW in Nam, whatever. He says Nam in the movie. In my head, I always say Nam because Vietnam, so Nam,
yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe it's like a regional dialect thing. As he's being booked, or maybe it's a time period thing. I don't know. Maybe back then Nam was more common, where now Nam. I don't know. Anyways, and he starts having PTSD, and then eventually the thing that really sets him off and what gets him to eventually break out of the prison is that they try to shave him. Mm-hmm. Even though he doesn't have a beard in this moment, he just has like some stubble, like a 5 o'clock shadow. They're going to shave him to put him into prison. And the knife and like them coming at him with a knife like really sets him off, and that's when he breaks out. Is that what happens in the book?
Yes. He starts having flashbacks while he's being booked, like when they want him to go down in the hole.
Yeah.
And then the shaving is the thing that ultimately sets him off, and he kind of goes bananas and breaks out.
Does the movie imply or reference the fact that it is to like being tortured in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like being like, because he has these scars on his chest from Nam in the movie where he has like they were like cutting him or something while they had him prisoner or something like that. So interesting. Is there, after he breaks out of prison, he steals a dirt bike, which just rips a guy off a dirt bike. He posted a picture of that today on social media. He rips a guy off a dirt bike and drives away, and then it leads to a big police chase. Well, the sheriff specifically starts chasing him, and he's on a motorcycle or a dirt bike, and sheriff's in his car. Does that happen in the book?
Yeah, he does rip. It's another cop in the book. He rips another cop off of a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And uses that to make his getaway. And Teasel does chase him, and he's able to get away like into the mountainy, forested area because he's on a bike, not a car.
Interesting, because if he pulled a cop off it, odds are it would be an actual like street motorcycle. In the book, as opposed to in the movie, it is like an actual dirt bike, which is much more suited to being off-road and driving through, because that's what I was immediately like after he gets the dirt bike in the movie. He's like driving down the streets for a long time, and I'm like, dude. And he's being chased by a cop car. I'm like, dude, get off the road. You're on a dirt bike. You can drive like almost anywhere. And then he does eventually, and that's how he gets away, kind of. But I just thought it was funny at first. I'm like, get off the road.
I don't think he's off-road for very long on the motorcycle in the book, but he does use it to like get into an area that they can't follow him.
And it would have like sense too, because he does, although it doesn't not make sense in the movie, but in the movie he has to abandon the dirt bike because he's driving up a hill, and he sort of he over revs it, and it flips out from under him because it's too steep of a hill. Which makes sense. Like if you've ever ridden a dirt bike, and if you're not like a super competent dirt bike rider, which I don't see why he would have a lot of experience, but he's enough that he can kind of get around on one. I have enough that I could drive around on a motorcycle or a dirt bike at least. But if I was trying to go up a hill like that, I would very likely not have my weight distributed the right way and flip it out from under me and be like, oh well, and then just run off. But if it's a street motorcycle, that would make sense that eventually once he gets to the mountains, he can't at all get it, anywhere. So a lot of stuff, they're chasing him for a long time, a lot of stuff happens, but eventually he gets to a cliff, big cliff in the movie, big exciting moment, and I think this is before Cliffhanger, because Sylvester Stallone's also in a movie called Cliffhanger that's like about mountain climbing, and I thought that was interesting, and I don't know where they fall in the timeline, but my guess is that this is before Cliffhanger. Just looking at it, still, I think from like the poster, I've never seen Cliffhanger, but the poster of Cliffhanger in my head, he looks older. So maybe
this is why he got the role.
Maybe, yeah.
They were impressed with his cliffhanging skills.
Yeah, maybe. But he has to climb down this giant cliff, this rock cliff that he's on, and it looks pretty realistic. Like I was impressed by like the tension in him climbing down. It didn't look super fake, which I think is a big criticism of Cliffhangers, that it's like super silly like mountain climbing. And this one, it's like realistic, him like sliding down and like in cracks and stuff. It looks fairly good to my eye. But eventually he kind of gets stuck, and this is when the helicopter shows up and starts shooting at him. And he can't go anywhere, and he sees this big giant pine tree like below him. And he has no choice, and he jumps from the cliff face into the tree and uses the limbs of the tree to break his fall, so he doesn't just fall 200 feet to the ground or whatever and die. And he falls through the tree, and it's a cool scene, and seems probably realistic-ish. I mean, he gets hurt from it. I think he'd probably end up with some broken ribs, and maybe he did. We don't know. But he survives that. Is that in the book?
Yeah, he does jump off the cliff. He uses the trees to break his fall. I think it's interesting that you said broken ribs, because he does break ribs doing that in the book. Yeah. And then he has to like grapple with having a broken rib for the rest of the story.
It's funny. I'm just realizing this is probably the part that what's his name was talking about in the review that I read. The critic, Leonard Maltin, who says the movie loses all credibility when he jumps onto some rocks, and which is hilarious because he doesn't jump he jumps into the tree, and he only ends up with one cut that we see in the movie, but I just assumed he also had broken ribs, and he doesn't say it out loud because it's not a terrible film. Like, he's not like, oh, my broken ribs. And
right, who would he say that to?
Well, who would he say it to? And you don't do anything for broken ribs necessarily. Like, there's not really much you can do. He could try to wrap himself somehow, but it wouldn't really make any sense. So, yeah. I think that's the part I was talking about. And to me, this actually felt fairly realistic. Like, he would be messed up and injured, but it didn't seem completely outlandish that you could survive that. And I don't know. Anyways, But it's funny that I was like, oh, that's probably the part he's talking about. I think you're wrong, Leonard Maltin. But it's in the book. So there's this character in the film named Mitch, who's one of the cops. He's played by David Caruso, who, if you most people would know from CSI Miami as the main character, like the main detective,
the guy who takes off his sunglasses.
Yeah, that guy, the redhead. He's in this film, a very young him, and he's like the good cop. He's like the cop who's like, when they're booking him and everybody's being a jerk, he's like, guys, I don't know how I feel about this.
Come on, guys.
I thought, no, don't do. Oh, but he doesn't do anything. I say the good cop, but he's
the ineffectual.
The ineffectual good cop who doesn't actually do anything, so he's still a bad cop. But he feels bad about being a bad cop. So, my point is, it's an interesting character, and he's played pretty well by Dave Caruso. Is he in the book? That character?
No, there are obviously a handful of other cops aside from Teasel, but there aren't any that I felt like directly correlated to the character of Mitch. Also, most of the cops in the book are dead within the first quarter of it. So. Spoiler!
We'll get to that later. Yeah. All right, so then we get the cops are still chasing him after this point. This is after the one guy's fallen out of the helicopter and died, and so they're super mad at him. They're coming after him in the woods, and this is when Rambo uses all of his sweet guerrilla warfare skills from Nam, and he's like building traps and hiding in trees, and he's got like a ghillie suit that he made and stuff in the movie. And at one point, he makes a big spike trap thing out of like a branch that he sharpens sticks to, and then it's set to a tripwire.
Have time to sharpen all those sticks?
Well, we saw him doing it in the movie. There's a moment where there's a moment where we see him. He's got like 20 of them in his lap, and he's just sharpening like little sticks.
He's so good at it.
Yeah,
he can do it so fast.
It's pretty easy to sharpen a stick into a spear with a Bowie knife. Like, you can do it pretty quick. You could probably do 20 of them in like 10 or 15 minutes, I would bet. You could do it pretty quick.
That's wild to me.
The harder part's like tying them all, like finding the stuff to tie them all to a thing and then rigging the trap. That would take longer than sharpening the sticks, I think. Anyways, as somebody with nominal whittling skills. But anyways, he makes this like big whip trap thing. I don't even know what it would be called, because I know some of the different.
It whips out and the spikes stab into the guy.
Yeah, because there's I know some different traps. There's like snares, there's deadfalls, there's all these things. He doesn't make any of those. It's something where it whips the branch out and it stabs the guy in the legs. And it's very dramatic. But is that in the book?
It is not.
Okay, he doesn't make a trap out of. It would be very effective against vampires if he placed it about 4 feet higher. Because it hits the guy like in the balls. Hits the guy in the legs, which he's also very lucky that he didn't hit there's 2 very important veins or arteries or whatever
major arteries
that run up the inside of each of your legs that is just as bad as like getting your jugular hit. Yeah. And he's very lucky he didn't hit any of those, because this guy survives apparently. But okay, no spike trap. And then right after that, he's now subdued all of the other cops, and he confronts Teasel. He sneaks up on him and he gets him against a tree with a knife, and he's like, just let it go. Let me leave. Let it go. And then he leaves him. But Teasel, of course, can't let it go because he's a jerk. Yeah. He's a bully. He's a cop. Not all cops. Hashtag not all cops. But a lot of them. Boy. Does that happen in the book?
That does not happen in the book.
Okay. That is an interesting scene, and we'll talk more about this later, the not killing the cops in the movie, and that sort of that scene of him like confronting him and being like trying to de-escalate the situation. We'll talk about that a little more later. This is a specific line question that I want to know, because it's probably the best line in the movie. It's in the trailer. It was in the prequel. I put it in the prequel episode trailer because I cut in the trailer for the prequel episode. It's a great line, and I don't remember exactly the first part of it. I think he says, "You telling me if I send 200 men, he'll win?" He says something like that. Teasel does, but this part is verbatim. And the General Troutman says, "Send that many, you better remember one thing." And Teasel says, "What?" And Troutman says, a good supply of body bags. Great line. It's a great action movie line. This movie, that particular scene is maybe the worst part of the movie. At least has aged the poorest. Is their sort of back and forth about how badass Rambo is. In my eyes, that is the only part of the movie that has aged poorly, and it's because probably that it's just been done a lot since then, and it's a staple of bad action movies because bad action movies rip off First Blood and stuff all the time, of the like, he's the best of the best. Oh, you're gonna go after him with how many men? Huh, that's 20 dead men. You know, like, it's become a cliche at this point,
right?
And it's probably the part to me of the movie that aged the worst in terms of like watching it and being like, all right, kind of rolling my eyes at it. I think maybe at the time, in the moment, it wouldn't have felt quite as cliche. Probably. Even then, it was probably still a little cliche. It's not like the 70s didn't have action. Not like there weren't action. There was tons of westerns and stuff before this, so I'm sure this kind of scenes existed before. But anyways, is that specific line about the body bags?
I don't recall that specific line being in the book.
You didn't recall it, so I did some quick Googling, and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Okay.
I did some quick Googling to see if it was in the book, and didn't see anything. So it looks like it is a movie creation. Another one, following right up with that, is the name drop of the film. Rambo's on the radio with his old general, and the general's like, "Why don't you come on in? We don't have to go any further with this." And Rambo's like explaining to him why this has all gone the way it has, and he says, "They drew first blood, not me. They drew first blood." It's the name of the movie and the book. Is that in the book?
I don't recall that one being in the book either.
Does he get on the horn with the general at some point? Does that scene happen? I didn't ask about that. Do you remember that at all?
It's much later on.
Okay.
When he's driving a stolen cop car, which is kind of the scene that's
with the truck. Or whatever?
With the truck. Yeah. And he does, like, he gets on the radio at that point and talks to him for a few minutes, but I don't.
You don't remember they drew first blood?
I like to think I would have remembered a title drop.
Yeah.
In the book.
The title drop to me seems like much more of a movie thing than a book thing.
Yeah.
So there's a whole sequence where eventually Rambo ends up in a mine. That it's kind of where his base of operations in the woods while he's hiding, and they track him to the mine through the radio call that he does, and they send all the army reserves come in. And they all show up, and they send all the army reserves to like quarantine off this mine and watch it. And Teasel's like, "Don't do anything, just stand there and don't let them leave." But the army reserves are there to play military because they, specifically one guy. The rest of them aren't really that super interested in it. But the leader, I don't know, captain or whatever of this military or of this army reserve squad, he's like, "Screw that! We're gonna kill this guy because." And that was an interesting scene and another interesting portrayal in the movie of sort of. Like toxic masculinity, and another one of those scenes where we get another moment of somebody getting a little bit of power
and just running
away with it in the same way that Teasel sort of does. Is that scene, and then so they shoot a rocket into the mine and blow it up, and they think they killed Rambo, but he ends up escaping and getting out. But is that scene in the book?
So there are like army reserve, or guardsmen maybe.
Yeah, National
in the
Guard
book, like National Guard or something. So there's less of an idea that they're like playing army in the book than there is in the movie. The mine collapse. In the book, Rambo actually collapses the mine entrance on purpose.
Interesting.
Because they're like hot on his tail. And he doesn't want to get he's like, okay, I'm going to surrender, but I don't want them to just immediately shoot me. So I need some kind of a buffer. So he collapses the mine entrance on purpose, intending to surrender. And then he lights the torch back there and sees the smoke and realizes that there's another exit somewhere. And he's like, nah, fuck that. I'm going to go deeper into the mine.
Oh, so he lights a torch and then the smoke goes...
Yeah, the smoke goes...
Yeah, which I kind of do that in the movie.
Yeah.
Well, at least that's how he eventually gets to the exit. The torch does the draft thing, and he notices that he's close to a way out. Okay, cool. The rats. As he goes deeper into the mine, there's this This is a great, very effective piece of filmmaking in terms of the claustrophobia, where he's in these tunnels in this mine, and he's like crouching down
It
in
keeps
water.
getting smaller
It's
and
smaller and
smaller.
smaller, and the water is like super high, and it's that thing where if you have any sort of like claustrophobia, or I'm not even particularly claustrophobic, but being
Yeah.
in caves with water and not knowing how small the next part of it's gonna be, or how you're,
That's a no for me.
That's gonna be a big no for me, dog. And then eventually it leads to a big moment where he gets into this chamber, and it's full of rats, and they're like all over him and stuff. And rats aren't really a big. I don't care about rats. Like, rats are fine. They don't really creep me out. But in a cave, in that
Yeah.
situation, I would not be on
A
board.
cave full of rats? No.
No thanks. It'd be worse if it was like spiders, but for me at least. But is that scene in the book?
No rats, but there is a similar scene with bats and beetles.
Oh, that would both be worse to me. I would rather
Yeah.
deal with rats, I think, than bats and beetles. Maybe not beetles, wouldn't be, depending on how many and where. But like bats carry weight. I think, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure bats carry way more diseases than rats do in general. I mean, rats famously, some very specific diseases, but in general, I'm fairly certain that bats carry like a lot. Well, I think you're much more likely to get like rabies and stuff from a bat than you are
Yeah,
from
I've
a rat.
heard that. I don't know how true
I don't
that
know how true
is,
that is,
but
but I
I
think
have
that's
heard
accurate.
that. The
Far be it
beetles,
from me to
the
spread
beetles,
misinformation,
though,
but I think
in the
that's
book
accurate.
are like biting beetles, like they bite him. I don't know what kind of beetle that's supposed to be, but
don't know.
they bite him.
Sounds
so
awful.
That does sound pretty
June bugs.
bad.
I think June bugs bite. Maybe not.
Ew, a cave full of June bugs? That's worse than everything.
Yeah. We have to go check on our fajitas.
That's our dinner.
We're recording this on Cinco de Mayo, so. This is an interesting little scene that we just talked about while we were watching the movie, so I wanted to ask who was in the book. At one point, after Rambo, they realize he's alive still, after they think he died in the mine collapse. He comes into town. He steals the truck, and he gets into town, and the sheriff gets on a town intercom and has the streets evacuated. And we were like, is that a thing? That's interesting. Is that in the book?
No, that's not in the book.
Okay. And we came to our sort of, we never looked it up, but we assumed that sort of in a very close to post-Cold War, still Cold War, kind of.
Yeah, early 80s.
No, this is the 70s.
This is the 70s still?
I think, yeah.
Okay. Pretty
Pretty sure this is still the 70s. It's right after Vietnam. I'm still right in the slightly post-Cold, whatever. In that period, you would still have, the towns would maybe have intercoms for
Emergencies, yeah.
alerting people to nuclear bombs and that sort of thing, or atomic bombs and that sort of thing. I wonder if in the modern day, if you can use, I would assume not, like the tornado sirens, if there's somehow an intercom. I would bet not.
I don't
I think
know.
those are specifically designed just to, you wind them up and
Yeah.
blow air through them and they make the noise. I don't think there's like a intercom system.
Well, but sometimes they play like this is a test. This is only a test.
In certain places.
In certain places. So maybe.
It may depend on the type of tornado siren. So, like,
Yeah.
because some of them I'm pretty sure are just, they're like, literally, they crank up and they just make the noise.
Mm-hmm.
But other ones are like just speakers that they play the noise through. So, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Interesting.
And all of our listeners who don't live in Tornado Alley are like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. But I would bet other cities might have them for, well, I guess if you lived on the coast, well, I bet in coastal regions where tsunamis, in other parts of the world, I bet there are like tsunami warning systems and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because those you can know about ahead of time, depending on, like, if you sense an earthquake.
Yeah.
Earthquakes, I know we can predict a little bit ahead sometimes, depending on certain situations. But
If there's an earthquake, you know it, though.
right. But, I mean, there's some that I think we've gotten to the point where certain types of earthquakes or something, we can get a little bit of warning, so they could potentially put out, I don't know.
And
Anyways.
hurricanes are slow moving.
And hurricanes, they don't need a warning system because you know days and days in advance. So, does Rambo blow up the local gun store, or like are any of the explosions in the movie in the book? Because he blows up a gun store in the movie and a gas station. I think those are the main two, but they're big explosions, and a car lot somehow. he doesn't really do that. It seems to like be a chain reaction from the gas station or something.
Yeah, a similar thing happens in the book. They don't specifically mention a gun store, but he does set a bunch of buildings on fire. He does set a gas station on fire, and there's mention of like a chain reaction from that, like through the gas lines. And he does also set the police station on fire in the book. In the movie, I think he just shoots it up.
Yeah, he gets the M60, and which becomes the Rambo gun in later movies. It's like he carries around an M60 is like his thing, which is a big machine gun if you don't know what an M60 is. He just shoots it up in the movie. Finally, last question for Was That in the Book? Is there a scene in the book, in the movie this happens, and it's the best scene in the whole movie? And when I say best, I mean like best made, most effective. It's what makes the movie good, in my opinion. I mean, the whole movie's good overall. We never really said that, but I think the whole movie is very effective and good overall. But the scene that makes it a truly good or great film is the scene at the end where Sylvester Stallone as Rambo breaks down to the old general, his old general, and has that moment where he just loses it and is talking about how he was flying jets and he has like a pilot's license and he was driving tanks or whatever back in Nam, and now he can't even get a driver's license or blah, 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 like all these different things. And just how he has no place in society anymore and he just loses it and all of his friends are dead and it's brutal and it's this fucking gut-wrenching scene. Does that monologue type of thing happen in the book?
No, that's
really?
a movie thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I really thought that scene would have been in the book.
No, and I do think it was really effective, and that scene in particular makes what Rambo the character has been mythologized into, I think, especially interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. I got a whole section about it. I want to talk about it in our odds and ends. Probably, I think it's where my note for it is, unless we get to it before that. But that's super fascinating to me. Might as well do it now. Why not? Because we're done with this section, and before we get to Lost in Adaptation,
my perception of Rambo the character before seeing this movie, before reading the book, just from cultural osmosis, from the way he's been mythologized, very toxic masculinity.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he's the quintessential
big guy who runs around shooting people,
shooting machine guns and blowing everything up. And here's the thing: I think that is what happens in the sequels, which is and I had this note in my odds and ends, but I had in all caps when we finished this movie: why on earth would you make a sequel to this fucking movie that is anything other than like Rambo, like living on a farm?
Yeah,
like.
Because it's cruel to make him do anything else.
Cruel and horrifying. And it's like, after the final monologue in this film, where he's just, he doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to kill people, but he doesn't know how to do anything else. And he was, at the beginning of the movie, we saw him, he just wanted to find a friend, and then his friend was dead, and then he just wanted to get something to eat, and then he was hassled, and then he's like, this guy's hassling him, and he's like, move on, and it's sort of the standing up in the face of like, I can do it. First off, anybody in America, anybody should be able to go and eat wherever they want, regardless of what I look like. But on top of that, I was in the military. Like I served this country in the war, and you're telling me I can't go to the local restaurant and get a sandwich? Screw you. And so he just wanted to like live his life and be a dude. And even then, the system, quote unquote, wouldn't let him do that. And when he breaks down at the end of the movie, it's just brutal. And Sylvester Stallone is great at it because you can't understand him half the time, which it's just so effective. And I was just sitting there like jaw on the floor, kind of in the sense of just like, God, this is brutal.
Yeah.
And the idea, and then he gets arrested. So in the movie, he gets arrested and walks out, and we'll talk about the differences later. But he gets basically the general kind of talks him down and gets him to turn himself in, and he gets arrested, and that's how the movie ends. And as we're watching that, I'm like, how do you make a sequel to this movie where he goes back to war?
Yeah.
It's the most cynical, insane
horrible
thing I've ever... Like, it's mind-blowing to me that... I mean, I get it, because it was a movie that made a bunch of money.
Yeah.
But talk about bankruptcy or talk about like cynical, mindless, money grubbing, like subversion of a message.
Yeah.
It's insanity. Now, I will say I don't know. I haven't seen like 2, 3, or 4 in this series. I saw, like I said, the one in 2008. I don't remember anything about it. I don't know if they came up with any sort of effective way to make sense of him going back to fight people or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if they did it in a way that makes sense or works. Maybe they did. My guess is but I can't see how possibly they could have. And even then, they should never have tried because it ruins the message of this movie. Mm-hmm. Even if they figured out a way to make it make sense, like, oh, well, you don't know how to do anything else but kill people, Rambo, so come help us. Like, okay, maybe that makes sense, quote unquote, but it's not.
It's still awful.
Awful. It's still horrifying. It's still just a nightmare. And a complete, and I would, again, I can't judge those movies. Maybe they still end up being indictments of the military-industrial complex. I don't know. But I can't imagine they are. I don't know. But you're right. It's mind-blowing. I was like, how do you make a sequel to this movie?
After the scene where he is allowed to be so vulnerable.
So vulnerable.
And to defy everything that toxic masculinity is.
Yeah.
And then to have
at times he even says things that are I don't necessarily agree with, like at the beginning of the rant at least, but yes, overall completely like, because he says something about like, but it's completely understandable within his character, because he you know, like he's at the beginning of his rant, he's dumping on the protesters he saw at the airport who were protesting the he took them as protesting him and like and calling him a murderer and stuff, and sure, maybe they were, I don't, you know, who knows? But, and there definitely probably were people that were. But overall, in general, I think a lot of the people protesting the war, the vibe that I get, at least it seemed like, weren't protesting necessarily the soldiers in the war so much as the idea of the fact that we were in this war at all. And it's and that even goes to today, you know, going up all the way up to the Iraq War. It's people who are protesting and upset about the fact that we're in this war aren't upset about the people necessarily who were soldiers in the war. So much as they are. But even that being said, this movie does a really good job of, I think, creating sympathy for somebody who is like a cold-blooded murderer in so much as Rambo is, in that he was created to be that thing. Yeah. Like, he didn't necessarily choose to be that thing. Like, the army turned him into that thing. Anyways, but yeah, you're right. Sorry, to get back to your point, that complete vulnerability.
He's allowed to cry.
Yeah. He sobs.
Cries. Yeah.
Yeah. He sobs openly, just completely loses it and sobbing, and he's like hugging the general who's there because it's the only person who's there and who could, he just needs any sort of connection with a person, and it's a masterful scene. Like, it's incredible. Like I said, I was just blown away by it. And then to make a sequel where he goes and like kills a bunch of people was like, what? What?
I hate everything.
Yeah. What? All right, we got that out of the way now, so we'll skip that when we get to our odds and ends later. But that was it for Was That in the Book? I do have a couple quick Lost in Adaptations, and then we'll get to your segments.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
This first question is, in the movie, Teasel sees him on the road, and it's not so much that Teasel immediately hates him that I'm confused about. It is a little bit, and I'll ask about that. But specifically in the movie, he says, you walk around looking like that around here, you're in for a bad time or something like that. And I don't understand what that means in the movie. And I don't know if there's more about this in the book. And now I'm thinking there probably isn't, because he's not wearing fatigues in the book. So do you have any input on what about his appearance other than being vaguely kind of unkempt?
I mean, I really can't help here. Like, he's not wearing anything that would identify him as a war vet when we meet him in the book. I mean, we were at his description earlier. He looks kind of vaguely homeless and driftery.
Yeah.
Long hair, beard, dirty clothes.
Yeah.
That comment that Teasel makes to him right off the bat in the movie about like looking like that, to me makes way more sense in the book.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
Because in the movie, he doesn't look particularly unkempt and like, I mean, his clothes aren't nice, but he's just wearing like jeans and a military jacket.
His clothes are like old and kind of shabby, but
yeah, he doesn't look, like I said, if he had
not,
like bloody,
grotesque.
if he had clothes that were covered in blood and like mud and stuff, and like he had this big long scraggly beard, and like I could at least see what the movie was saying. But then I was wondering if it was some reference to him being on like the West Coast.
I don't know,
because he was in the military and being on the West Coast where there's more progressive people in general, and that they don't look so kindly on soldiers. Like if that's what he was saying. But it's interesting coming from Teasel because he's also a vet and is in
like
the movie.
A small town cop.
And a small town cop who is very much strikes you as more of the like authoritarian fashy type of person. So it's very strange. It's very interesting.
It was strange to me, and he like specifically like points at the American flag on his jacket and is like, "You walk around with that, you're gonna have trouble." I'm like, what are we talking about right now?
And he's a cop. It's so fascinating because and that was the thing. I was like, well, maybe it's supposed to go even one level deeper to Teasel's inner resentment, which we'll get to here in the next section of. Because Teasel's also a vet, and he is in the movie. They don't necessarily openly discuss it, but we do know he is because there's moments in his office where we see military medals and stuff on the wall. And so maybe he always felt disrespected to that, like, at least in terms of his military background. Maybe he felt like the people in this area didn't respect his military service, so he's sort of like transferring that on to Rambo, like, people around here, they don't take kindly to soldiers or whatever because, and maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to read into it more, maybe some extra layer that maybe isn't there. But I just thought it was interesting. I don't know. I didn't quite understand that part in particular, and I also just don't know enough about how like Vietnam vets were seen post-war, like very close post-war. I don't have that background or that historical context.
No, and it's almost impossible to because we don't talk about it.
No,
I mean, I don't.
I could ask my mom. I mean, her first husband was in Vietnam, so like she would have a better somebody like that. They may have a better understanding of. I mean, they lived right through that period to know how that was sort of seen, at least. But there are people who would know. But we don't have that experience, obviously.
I mean, as far as like my experience in school goes, like U.S. history education basically ends with World War II. Like
we did a little bit on like Vietnam and stuff in the Cold War, but
I don't think we ever touched anything past the Second World War until I was like well into high school.
Yeah, maybe. No, we did. I did a little bit before that, but not much. Yeah, you generally don't get that far up.
Yeah.
Much earlier than high school, but maybe a little bit.
Which I could go on about, but...
Last question for Lost in Adaptation. Does the book, and I kind of mentioned this, but does the book go into any more about the motivation, about why Teasel so quickly, completely hates Rambo? Obviously, the motivation we kind of see on the surface in the movie is that he's the sheriff. He doesn't want any riffraff, any, vagrants wandering around his city. He's trying to keep it quiet and nice and that sort of thing.
Keep the streets clean.
That sort of nonsense. But he seems to, in the movie, and we kind of get over the course of the movie why a little bit, of why he seems to have this sort of deeper hatred of Rambo. Do we get any more of that in the book?
So at first, Teasel doesn't like Rambo for many of the same reasons. Rambo's non-compliant, doesn't want to obey authority and do as he's told, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Looks vagranty,
yeah,
etc. There's a big shift in motivation when Rambo kills Orval, who was the old man with the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Because in the book, we know that Orval was actually Teasel's adopted father. and took care of him after his father was killed in a hunting accident. So there's like a big shift in motivation there where he gets kind of like a revenge thing going.
Yeah.
And
we get a little bit of that in the movie.
I think the movie attempts to do that with
the other
Galt,
guy.
the other cop.
The guy in the helicopter.
But I don't think they did a good job of like building any kind of bond between them.
No. Yeah, we get less of a bond between them, but he does say like he killed one of ours. You know, that's kind of like revenge becomes more of a motivating factor.
Yeah.
In the movie after Galt dies, or whatever that guy's name is. Is it really Galt? Is he named after Randy and? Is he named after John Galt?
SGALT.
It's very fitting that a cop would be named after an Ayn Rand archetypal hero. But anyways, what did you say?
GALT.
Yeah, that's John Galt. It's the same. Interesting.
Which there is a cop named Galt in the book, but I think he dies like right away when Rambo starts fighting his way out of the police station. I think that's the one who, The other cops aren't really that important.
This movie answers who is John Galt. He's a fascist cop who falls out of a helicopter like a dumbass and dies.
There we go.
There you go. But the other thing we wanted to mention and touch on here that I found during my pre-movie research and then wanted to touch on again here that you didn't get much of out of the book, and we think there's a couple, one main reason for that, is that it seems to be that people who have read the book found that part of Teasel's motivation for hating Rambo is that Teasel was also a veteran, as we mentioned, and we see that a little bit in the movie with his medals and stuff, and I think a little bit hinted at in the conversation he has at the bar with Troutman, that Teasel was a Korean War vet. Mm-hmm. And the Korean War is considered known as the Forgotten War. It's definitely didn't have the sort of notoriety that the Vietnam War had, and it just sort of ended. Mm-hmm. And so Teasel has this sort of built-in jealousy of vets from other wars that are seen as more sort of heroic, and he feels that he's been short-shrifted in that regard, and that he's also a vet, and I believe in the book it's mentioned or something, as is what I read at least, and we see from the medals in the movie he has some sort of service medal. So
yes, he has like a Medal of Honor and like something else.
Yeah, he has like distinguished service medals, but nobody talks about it and nobody cares. And I think maybe that's an interesting thing in the movie, is that it's never mentioned. It's like a kind of a nod to the book's fact that he feels that it's never acknowledged, but he has these medals on his desk, but nobody in the movie ever mentions that he's a war vet or whatever, or that he has these distinguished medals and that sort of thing. But apparently that is part of his resentment, is that he feels like Rambo, he's jealous of other war vets.
So maybe like a couple hours ago when I was working on my notes for this, you came in and said that to me, and I was very taken aback. Yeah. Because I did not get that at all reading the books. I knew he was a vet in Korea. He talks about it in the book. We spend quite a bit of time, like the book alternates back and forth between Teasel's and Rambo's perspectives. So we spend quite a bit of time with Teasel in the book. And he does talk a lot about being in Korea. And we know that he has his medals, his Distinguished Service Awards, but I never got like the jealousy thing.
Interesting.
And I'm wondering if that might be due to like some cultural cues that I don't know to look for.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Seems very likely, very possible that there's some language and cultural cues that you're just not privy to, not being of that time period.
Yeah, not being of that time period, of that generation, and really not even knowing a whole lot about the culture that surrounds those two wars. Yeah. I mean, aside from like what you could read in a textbook.
Right. I mean, I know literally nothing about the Korean War because it is kind of the forgotten war. Like, I literally know almost nothing about it.
We don't talk about Korea, and we don't talk about Vietnam except to kind of joke about it.
I mean, I know a little bit more about the Vietnam War, a little bit, but that's mainly because of movies, because there's been a bunch of movies made about it. There hasn't been a bunch of movies made about the Korean War. So, it's definitely, it's an interesting dynamic, and I think that is probably part of it, is that maybe just you don't have that cultural understanding of the differences and the the attitudes of the time and that sort of thing, and how he would be like. Maybe it's almost an implicit thing that is read into the character.
I mean, and maybe I was supposed to know that
Yeah.
as a Korean vet that he would feel that way.
Yeah.
But how could I?
Maybe it's a prominent feeling among
Yeah.
Korean war. I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating here.
And
But yeah, it's
I
interesting.
don't think I know a single Korean war vet, like, personally.
I knew.
I don't think I do.
I knew quite a few growing up because a lot of like my people in like Boy Scout troops and stuff, their dads
that
or
makes sense,
grandfathers
yeah.
were in like the Korean War.
Yeah.
And so I knew some, but never taught. It never came up. Like, and then my grandparents and stuff were. Some of them were, or great grandparents and grandparents were in World War II, and then I had uncles and stuff that were in Vietnam and whatnot. But
My grandpa was in the army, but he was not in during wartime
yeah,
at all. He missed out on that.
yeah.
Darn.
Shucks.
Rats.
All right, that's it for Lost in Adaptation. Let's do it better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
All right, so one thing that I was a little disappointed, I don't know if it would have fit tonally in this movie, but in the book, Teasel actually drives Rambo out of town like 3 times, and he keeps turning around and coming back. Rambo also has like a little bit of attitude in the book. Like, he's
Yeah.
kind of sassy.
Yeah.
Kind of got a smart mouth on him, which, again, I don't know if that would have worked out tonally with what the movie was going for, but it did make for an interesting character right off the bat, like somebody who was fun to read about, you
Yeah.
know? So when Rambo escapes from the police station in the book, he's actually completely naked, completely starkers. Escapes from the police station.
Yeah, they couldn't have done that.
No, they couldn't have. Steals the motorcycle completely naked, rides it out of town completely naked.
That's fantastic. They kept a little bit with him being shirtless so that he has
Yeah.
to find a top. But I mean, the thing is, I feel like the only way to do that in the movie is for it would have to be played comedically.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way to do that unless it's like, because they can't. They either have to show very little in the movie in order to maintain your rating, which is maybe silly in its own regard, that in a movie where we watch people bleeding all over the place, and it's not super violent movie. I mean, it's violent, but it's not like a overtly like gory film necessarily. But maybe it is a little silly that in a movie where, no, it's definitely silly that in a movie where people are like being stabbed and,
Yeah.
and whatnot, that a penis hanging around would be a big nightmare for the ratings. That's a whole nother thing. But this scene, you can imagine it being done if he was naked in a comedy film, or like a fun action comedy, like
Yes.
where like they're holding up different things in front of them as they're escaping, or the camera's just always at the wrong angle, or you know what I mean, like. It wouldn't tonally fit in with
not
the,
at all.
with the PTSD into the escape from the jail. It just wouldn't quite fit. But it is, yeah, it does make sense because he is naked at one point in the when they're like spraying him down or whatever. But
So I mentioned before that we spend a lot of time with Teasel in the book, so we have a lot of his backstory. We know who he is. We know his relationship with Orval. We know that his wife has left him. We know all of these little pressure points that he has. Now, I'm going to talk about it more in my final verdict. I don't know that having all of his backstory would have worked with what the movie has set out to do, but I do think it's interesting.
yeah,
And I think it was more interesting to read a multi-dimensional character.
yeah. I think the movie gives us little hints about it, but it always still kind of falls back into just the bully cop
Yeah.
like sort of archetype. We get, there are flashes of moments. Like there was a moment when he goes to the bar and has a drink with Troutman where there's some humanity to him that is when they're having that discussion, but then it disappears very quickly.
Yeah.
And then it just goes right back to him being, a vengeful, angry bully. And yeah, it could definitely wouldn't have been upset with a little more for his character.
There's a scene in the book where Rambo meets an old moonshiner in the woods, and basically like blackmails him into giving him clothes and a gun, because he's like, I saw your moonshine equipment.
You're still.
And so you give me that gun, and I won't walk up there by it, and then the cops won't find it because they're following my trail.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Don't know if it fits the character of Rambo that the movie portrays, but it was a fun scene. Also interesting to talk about fun scenes in this story, but it was kind of fun.
Yeah, there's very few.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Speaking of not fun scenes, though, the way that the dogs die, I hated dog death.
Not great.
Not a fan. But I did think that the way the book did it was more horrific, because they're all up on a cliff and Rambo is kind of like sniping them off as they're kind of stuck up on the top of this cliff. They don't really have anywhere to hide, all the cops and Orval and all of his dogs, and he's kind of picking them off. And one of the cops is holding like 2 of the dog leashes, and he shoots that cop. Cop falls off of the cliff and the dogs get dragged down with him.
Good.
I know.
Jeez.
It's really
That's
brutal.
not better in the book. That's the movie. It was already bad enough when he's murdering the dogs off screen.
I know we're not going to show him shooting people, but he can kill dogs.
Well,
That's okay.
We don't show him killing dogs either. It happens off camera. I mean, we see him on camera stabbing and like, you know, doing bad things to people in the movie, but we don't see him kill any people.
Yeah.
But he does kill the dogs, but he had no choice. I mean, with people, you can injure them, and then I guess technically with dogs, maybe, but it's a lot harder, I feel like. Like, those dogs were going to destroy him if he didn't kill them.
Yeah.
Whereas with the people, he can kind of like cut their leg and run off, and then they're out of commission. But
regardless, it was very dramatic in the book. It's a very dramatic scene. One of the things that I kind of, I guess, struggled with in the movie was that, like, once Rambo gets into the woods, I felt like he kind of went from, like, 0 to 50 with, like, the guerrilla warfare.
yeah.
And he does that in the book, too, like, once he gets away from the police station. But I felt like having his inner monologue made that progression a little bit easier to follow.
Yeah. It didn't bother me in the movie. I got it because and I think in the movie it worked for me because we're seeing the PTSD flashbacks, and it just, to me, it just made sense that he just kind of goes into this flight or fight response, like that's kind of been grilled into him. But I could see how the added benefit of his inner monologue in the book would flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Again, if you're just watching the movie, like, no problem. Like, it worked for me, but yeah, having a little bit more in the book, I can see being better.
There's a great conversation right around when Teasel and Troutman first meet, where they talk about how we as a society have kind of chewed up Vietnam vets and spat them back out and said, ew, gross.
Yeah.
So at one point, there is a specific line that I felt like I was really missing here in this movie. At one point, Teasel says, I don't kill for a living. And Troutman responds, of course not. You tolerate a system that lets others do it for you. And when they come back from the war, you can't stand the smell of death on them. Which I thought was a really powerful and indictful line.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, I mean, the movie, I think, captures that overall sort of oeuvre or
I
whatever,
agree.
that feeling, you know, and the final monologue, which the movie has that the book lacks, I think helps drive that home a little bit. And it definitely makes you feel that when you're watching the movie, but that particular line is very strong. And yeah, but I think the movie does capture that overall, because I definitely felt, you know, you feel bad about war and stuff, which, you know, makes sense.
Another thing that's not necessarily better in the book, because I wouldn't have wanted to watch this in the movie, similar to like the dogs. So in the movie, we see him kill like a wild boar, and eat it. In the book, he has to he catches this nasty old owl at night. It's like really old and like tough, and he's like trying to cook it, and he's like, "I wish I had salt and pepper." I don't know. I wouldn't want to watch it.
Yeah.
But it was more interesting.
Yeah. That's one of those changes that makes sense, but it's still interesting in the book.
When he's down in the mines in the book, he actually finds the skeleton of a miner down there. Like, just chilling. Some guy who died in the mines.
I feel like there could definitely be some sort of symbolism and... because I don't think he finds... Does he find a dead body in the movie? Doesn't he?
I don't think so. I don't remember him finding one.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of when I was playing Uncharted. But but I think there could be some really interesting symbolism there. That could have been a good scene to have in a movie. I think there's definitely some usable, meaningful, like I said, symbolism there between the people that society finds expendable.
Yeah.
And that not necessarily that society like finds expendable, but that is expendable, and that we just sort of let happen as the society and deal with as a society is, soldiers going off to war and then dying or coming back and being broken people, and miners, and tons of other people, but people working in checkout lines in grocery stores in 2020.
Blue collar work. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is most people in a capitalist system. But it is interesting. I think there could be some really good there could have done something really clever with that if they had included that in the film.
No, yeah, I think so. And then my last note here, I'm a little torn on the rats versus the bats in the cave. I don't approve of a smear campaign against either.
No, I agree, yeah.
But I do like bats more.
I like bats more.
I like bats. Like, as an animal, I like bats more.
They're more interesting, but I also would less be like to be around a bat than a rat.
I also think, so in the book... the way he gets out of the cave is that he sees which way the bats are flying.
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
And follows them to an opening,
yeah,
which I
in
thought
the evenings
was
they go out.
Really interesting, and I thought could have ended up being a cool scene in a movie.
Yeah, that would have made sense. I mean, I know why they did rats, because you can wrangle rats.
Yeah.
They're easy to have in a, compared to bats, it would be very tough. So I get it.
I don't know if you could wrangle bats.
I don't think you can wrangle bats necessarily. Like flying foxes and stuff, maybe, but like bats, like a bunch of them, probably not so much, I would guess. Whereas you kind of can with rats. So yeah, I get it. But yeah, that would have been cool, using the bats to find his way out. All right, that was it for Better in the Book. Let's go ahead and talk about what was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So I liked the movie's choice of opening by having Rambo be looking for his war buddy, who then ends up being dead. I thought that was a gut punch of an opening. It was very humanizing.
For sure.
I also like that they gave Rambo a special weapon. Mm-hmm. It's like his Anduril.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. His knife.
Yeah.
It's got fun. It's definitely his Red Ryder BB gun with the compass and the stuff. I forgot to mention this. This is a random note I found. So that tarp he finds in the movie, that after he escapes from prison where he's shirtless, they found that wasn't a prop. They just found that while they were filming, and apparently, this is an IMDb trivia fact, I'm pretty sure, so take it with a grain of salt. But according to IMDb trivia, Sylvester Stallone still has the rest of that tarp, like in his house, like he kept it or something. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
I hope he has it like above his mantle.
Yeah.
like mounted.
Yeah. No, I hope he has it like a throw rug, like a hunter has like a bear or whatever. He just has the tarp from First Blood in front of his fireplace.
I also liked that the movie showed him stitching himself up after he got hurt.
Yeah.
We don't see any of that aspect of his training in the book. We mostly just see him being violent, so I thought it was interesting to see that aspect of it.
It was also really well done in the movie. I was like borderline questioning if they had actually cut his arm and he was sewing himself back. I mean, obviously not, but it looked so good that I thought, because I was looking for, I mean, we've watched a lot of like Face Off and stuff. I know a little bit about prosthetics and stuff, and so I was looking for, you know, seams and like, or any like because it's
bad
on
edges,
like not even bad edges, but just where it's like raised up, because you have to add, because not only was he's sewing up flesh, there was blood coming out of it, so they had some sort of piping, or you know, there was something going in there, and they did a really good job to where it didn't look like, you know, this weird bulge on his arm in a weird place. Like anatomically it looked good, so I was very impressed by that.
I wonder if it helps having somebody who's like muscular.
Yeah, you can hide him.
There's like already a bulge.
And you can also, because it's like right on, I think it was like right along where the dip on his bicep is, from like his shoulder to his bicep, so like they kind of built that out a little bit, would be my guess from where looking at it, which helps kind of disguise it a little bit, but still, yeah, I was very impressed. Glenn Hetrick would have approved.
But make it more steampunk.
Make it more yeah, should have sewed it up with I don't know, trying to think of what steampunk thread is. I don't know what.
I don't know.
Brass wire. I guess. I don't know.
It's about the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That was for 4 of you. You're welcome.
So Mitch, the quote-unquote good cop, has a line that I liked when they're in the forest. He says, "We ain't hunting him, he's hunting us."
Yeah.
And Teasel has a similar realization in the book. But I thought that was a great, like, single line. It
is, and it's become a trope, and I don't know if it's a trope because of this movie or if it was before this. Yeah. My guess is probably from this movie, because that is an action movie trope of, you know, oh, we're not hunting him, he's hunting us, type of thing, where you got a bunch of bad guys against one good guy or whatever, or vice versa. But yeah.
And speaking of, we also see his guerrilla warfare skills in the movie, which we don't really all that much in the book.
Oh, interesting.
Like hiding in the brush with his ghillie suit.
Yeah.
The leaping down out of the tree, the booby traps, the decoy that he makes.
Yeah, he makes like a scarecrow.
None of that really. There's like one point in the book where he like hides in the mud. But other than that, we don't really see like those kind of specific things that you think of.
Yeah, when you think of like guerrilla
warfare. Although I thought having the bats lead him up out of the cave in the book was really interesting and could have potentially made a cool movie scene, I also really appreciated the visual cue when he climbs up out of the caves, out of the mines, with the opening overhead in the mine like mimicking where he was kept as a prisoner of war. Yeah, like in the hole. The climax of this movie is way more interesting than the climax of the book. Like he was like shooting out all the lights, and like him and Teasel were stalking each other around, and then he goes and blows up the entire gun shop for like noise cover, and then Teasel falls through the like skylight. There's like a lot going on. It was really exciting and fun to watch. And then of course Rambo's breakdown at the end we already talked about, but
just so good.
It's not in the book, and it's really gut-wrenching and awesome.
All right, let's talk about what the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
I thought the movie nailed the PTSD flashbacks, and especially like what his triggers were for those, like with them trying to shave him and everything.
Yeah, and the bars on the window reflecting the bars over him, and
Yeah, I thought they did a good job with that.
Yeah,
like, all the
it's
way
very
around.
subtle. It's very quick. Like, and they don't continue that theme, which I thought was interesting. I thought, or like they don't continue that, but that's what sets him off, and then he goes from there. But yeah, it's only a few times.
It's only a couple times, but I think it's enough for us to understand.
Well, it's enough to understand,
happening.
And it's done really well in a way that feels to me. I don't suffer. I don't deal with trauma and that sort of thing, but it felt to me like a realistic-ish portrayal of the type of thing that somebody who had dealt with intense trauma, the type of things that would trigger them.
Yeah, where you
know what I mean?
can like hear something or see something
Yeah.
that just like puts you right back there.
Yeah, it felt really realistic.
Snatching the guy right off the motorcycle / dirt bike. Thought they nailed that. Except that in the book it's another cop, not a civilian, and he's naked. So
Rambo is not the cop. That would be a whole different film with the cops just cruising around naked on a motorcycle. It's like, I feel like there's a whole nother story here that we're not getting. Why is that cop naked? Or if it was the civilian in the movie, he's just naked on the motorcycle. Like, why is he? What is? Well, all right.
it's a very liberal town.
Yeah, sure. It is the West Coast after all.
I thought, although he had pretty limited screen time, I thought they did a good job of Orval and his sniffing dogs. Bloodhounds.
They're not bloodhounds, but yeah, they're
this bloodhound-esque dogs.
Because there's some sort of like they're a more aggressive looking dog than a bloodhound. Because I think part of that is if Rambo had been murdering like floppy-eared bloodhounds, it would not have been. But also he couldn't have sent those like bloodhound like those you know like the basset hounds or whatever that you sometimes use for tracking aren't the same dogs that you use for like subduing,
right, tracking and hunting.
But there are dogs, and that's what these are, which are like mastiffs or something is what they look like. I think they're like mastiffs of some sort, which are
I didn't really get a good look at them. They kind of reminded me of Dobermans.
Yeah, Dobermans are mastiffs. There's some some of those dogs that are very much in the type of breed that have the jaws and the musculature and the speed and sort of thing to like hunt and bring down people.
The scene where he is stuck on the side of the cliff, posse on one side, helicopter on the other, and getting shot at, and then he jumps down into the trees. I thought they did a good job with that. The one trigger-happy young cop who has to keep being told to stop shooting.
Oh, yeah.
That guy's from the book. I think Singleton, is his name.
Yeah, that's the guy who tries to shave him in the movie.
Yeah.
And that's the guy, that actor, I kept trying to figure out what I knew him from. And I one of the main things I knew him from, he was in Twin Peaks. But if you're a Good, Bad, or Bad fan, and you're listening to this, the other thing he's in is he was in Narcs, the Alex Maisonette film Narcs. He was a small role in that, and he's like one of the like only named actors that like Alex Maisonette got for that movie, and he plays one of the cops or something. And I didn't recognize him at the time because this movie and Twin Peaks are like his biggest things. He's been in a bunch of TV shows and like bit roles and stuff, but those are his big things. And it was so funny because I was like, I know him from something, and I was like, oh my gosh, he was in Narcs.
I bet Alex Maisonette was really excited to
right?
get a guy who was in First Blood.
Yeah, a guy. He was a cop in First Blood. This guy knows how to play a cop. Yeah.
Hiding in the mines and then getting trapped in the mines. That was right out of the book. Obviously, some changes that we talked about.
And we didn't mention, but that also makes a lot of sense. And I thought I was sort of surprised they didn't do anything with the flashbacks from that.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the tunnels and stuff was a big part in Vietnam of the warfare. The Viet Cong and stuff, used tunnel things extensively and as sort of like hideouts and bases and that sort of thing. And it's been shown a lot in movies and stuff of people who took a flashlight and a pistol and went through these tunnels looking for enemies and that sort of thing. And it's terrifying, and I'm surprised they didn't use that as another moment to sort of have a flashback to like his experiences in Vietnam.
But I guess it does make sense then that he would know how to navigate that.
But that was my point, is that he does know how to navigate it. And it also makes sense that they don't need to have the flashback because he's already he's already kicked over to his war mode. Yeah,
he's in fight or flight.
He's not having flashbacks anymore. He's not he doesn't need to be re-triggered. He's already kicked over and is there, so.
And then the end when he sets everything on fire was from the book. So they nailed that.
There you go.
Everything's on fire.
Perfect. All right, we got a few odds and ends, general notes, and then we'll get to the final verdict.
I think my favorite thing potentially in this whole movie, not really, but I really little, like, quirky my favorite thing. Little like thing that made me chuckle.
Yeah.
When he breaks out of the police station and he's like wrecking hell and like punching
like
people.
Punching and kicking people.
Yeah.
And breaks that one guy's nose, which he actually did in real life, apparently.
And like gets his knife back and runs out. There's a secretary or somebody, I assume a secretary because of the time period, and it's a woman in the police station.
Yeah, you would assume.
In the background, not giving a single fuck. She does not even look up. And I'm just like, you know what? As someone who has done her fair share of secretarial and receptionist work, same.
Yep.
I feel you, girl.
You identified
this
hard.
Is out of my pay rate. I'm not.
You're not paying me enough to deal with a half-naked man beating you guys up. Not at all. I don't even get insurance. Are you kidding me?
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was funny. So I knew the rough plot of this movie after we did the prequel. Didn't know in like any of the details, but I knew the rough plot. And I knew the sheriff was like the bad guy, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. But man, from moment one, this movie does a great job of making me hate the sheriff.
Yeah.
With no dialogue, almost no dialogue. He has one line where he says hi to somebody as they're like driving down the street, but it's just him. We're introduced to his character. He walks out of the police station. And just and this is a credit to the actor, which I can't remember his name now. Oh no, I was just looking at it. But it's a credit to that actor who played Teasel. Is it just the way he walks, the way he carries himself, the way he's everything about him just screams that sort of like cocksure, too big for his britches. This is a guy who's always wanted power and got a modicum of it, and you just immediately know he's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like just immediately, without him saying a word.
Yeah.
It's so apparent, and I was just like really impressed by that filmmaking, and again, mainly that the acting that this actor does.
Oh, I thought this movie had it was a great commentary, and I think could potentially be even better commentary if they had focused on it more, I think, about
tread carefully. No, I know.
About the type of person who seeks that kind of power that comes with being a cop, and particularly like a small town cop where you are the law. You are the law. I am the law. Yeah. Yeah, which is funny because that's another Sylvester Stallone movie. I Am the Law. It's a Judge Dredd. But yeah, Brian Dennehy is the actor's name who plays Teasel in this movie. Because it definitely is a sort of scathing indictment of the specific type of person who seeks out that fascist authority position. Because not to say that policing in general is a fascist thing, but certain personality types that seek out that undeniable position of power to use and abuse is obviously a problem, and this movie does a great job of capturing it very naturally and not being over, like, it's not, I mean, there are at times it is overt where like Brian, where Teasel's yelling like, this is my town, like it has those moments. But it also has those moments where as soon as we just see this guy walk out the front doors of the police station, you're like, this fucking guy. Well, and that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I could probably count more than one hand the number of bullies I went to high school with who went on to either do or try to do some type of police work. Yeah.
I mean, it's a stereotype.
Yeah.
And again, it's not fair, and it's hashtag not all cops. But it is, there's definitely some people with certain personality types that are drawn to that position of power, and this movie is commenting on that, and I think it does so very effectively.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So, like, partway through the movie, and I didn't know this beforehand. I think you did.
I did.
Because you saw it as
I saw it as like a
trivia
movie
piece.
trivia thing,
And I was about to type my fingers were poised, and I was about to type, by my account, Rambo hasn't actually killed anyone in this movie. But then he's driving in the truck, and he pushes the cop car into another car, and it flips and catches on into a parked car, and it flips and catches on fire. And I was like, oh, but those guys are surely dead, right?
So that was the thing I looked up, is that the movie made an explicit choice to not have Rambo actively and first-handedly kill anybody.
Yes. He does a lot of injuring.
He does a lot of injuring, and he does a lot of his actions result in the deaths. Not a lot of. He does some. His actions result in the death of people. Like, he throws a rock at the helicopter, and that causes the helicopter to swerve, which causes the guy to fall out of the helicopter. But the reason he fell out of the helicopter, from my memory, is that he unbuckles himself because he wants to get a better shot.
Wants to get a better shot.
So it's
his hubris.
Yeah, his hubris and his sort of bloodlust and that sort of thing kills the guy in the helicopter, and it's not really Rambo's fault. He's just trying to get him to leave him alone or whatever. So I get all that, and I think with the car incident, I think it's to be understood and implied that they probably survived. They're wearing their seatbelts. The car just kind of crashes and flips over. Odds are maybe, they survived with some injuries. So he doesn't actually kill anybody. And that apparently was a deliberate choice by the filmmakers. They wanted, and that, as you mentioned, the book, he kills lots of people.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He leaves a very wide trail of blood in the book.
Yeah. And the movie decided that they thought it would make him a more sympathetic character if he wasn't killing a bunch of cops. And I think that's probably true in 1976 to a white audience. So I think that was probably a smart choice. And I think that it's an interesting decision. And I think it probably makes overall sense. And I want to talk about it more when we get to your last note about the end of this movie and the end of the book, because I think that's where it comes into play a lot.
Yeah.
And we'll get to it a little bit more when we get to the finale here in a second. So is First Blood a Christmas movie? Didn't we? I think this came up in
Did it come up?
When we talked about Die Hard. I think it was one of the movies that was mentioned, because I remember saying I hadn't seen First Blood
at Christmas.
Like Die Hard is set at Christmas. Now I will say this. We came down on the side that Die Hard was not a Christmas movie when we did that episode. I will say this. Die Hard is more of a Christmas movie than First Blood is. First Blood also takes place around Christmas vaguely, there are Christmas decorations. It's sometime around Christmas.
Could be before, could be
but
after.
Nobody ever says, at least from my memory, nobody ever says oh, Christmas is next week.
Die Hard does a lot more with the Christmas element.
Yeah, for sure. So I will give all of you Die Hard Christmas movie stands that Die Hard is much more of a Christmas movie than First Blood is. Because First Blood does happen to be set around Christmas, but it is not remotely a Christmas movie in any way compared to Die Hard. If you're comparing those two, for sure, Die Hard is the Christmas movie.
Were they filming this at Christmas time? Because if not, that's a hell of a choice.
They may have been.
To just be let's throw some Christmas decorations up and never mention it.
Yeah, they may have been. They may have been doing it during Christmas. I don't know, maybe the town, because they filmed it in a town in Canada. They filmed it in Hope, Ontario or something. They filmed it in some town called Hope in Canada, and then pretended it was a town called Hope in Washington. So, but yeah, I don't know. But it is set around Christmas, which is interesting. We mentioned in the prequel episode that this was originally a 3-hour movie, and that Sylvester Stallone hated it and wanted to burn it and never have anybody see it. And they cut it down. They recut it to an hour 30, and boy, that was a good decision.
Yes,
because. So, I think this movie could have been a little bit longer and still been really, really good, still been great, but 3 hours would have been
oh my God,
a nightmare.
Yeah.
And the thing that's so good about it at an hour 30 is, if you can make a movie an hour 30 and have it be this good, make it an hour 30 and have it be this good. Maybe an hour 45, maybe 2 hours would have added a little more. Maybe they could have fleshed out Teasel a little more. Maybe we could have added a little more of the survival moments with Rambo or some flashbacks with him. Maybe that stuff all could have been fleshed out a little more. Maybe.
But I don't think we necessarily
needed it. No, 100% we didn't need it, and 100% it would drag down the tension in this film, because that's what this movie is so good at, is it's just a tense, it's a nonstop, like thrill ride for like, it's tense as shit for like an hour and 30 minutes. You're just like, what's gonna happen next? How's he gonna get out of this? Like, you're just along for the ride, and if you drag that out even to 2 hours or 2.5 hours, it just loses that a little bit.
Yeah, I love movies. There's a lot of good movies out there that are current. But honestly, I would love to see Hollywood return to economical storytelling.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. The thing is that for a movie like this, there's no reason for it to be an hour 30. Like, for certain movies, when we went and saw Avengers Endgame, that movie had to be 3 hours. There's so much to get done, so much to do. And that movie is a completely different beast because there's a lot of tone, like, it shifts a lot tonally. We have a lot of comedy. It's a lot lighter at parts. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of dramatic, intense moments, but it's not what the movie isn't a tension thriller action survival movie. Yeah, it's a fun action adventure comedy drama. Like, so yeah, that can be 3 hours because I don't want to. I'm not digging my fingernails into my palms the whole film. Whereas Rambo, I don't know what you do with the other hour and a half of this movie that makes it any better, but also doesn't make it lose any of the tension, because if you're doing it for 3 hours, it's just gonna get boring.
Yeah, no,
So,
I agree.
It was really, yeah. It's got to be one of those films that was probably best saved by editing. Mm-hmm. It's got to be up high on that list of like films saved by the editor. Or in the editing room.
And I don't remember if we actually mentioned this in the prequel or if you and I talked about it afterwards, but I feel like First Blood should be the example that we trot out when people bitch about like reshoots.
Prequel, yeah, we mentioned it in the prequel. Yeah, because they did extensive reshoots there, and they did extensive recutting of the film, and boy,
was that a good choice?
Apparently that was a very good choice, because yeah. It's a much better film for it. All right, last note before we get to final verdict. Let's talk about the end of the movie.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because I wasn't really comfortable putting it in either of my categories, but I think we're remiss not to talk about it because it is a big change.
Yeah, for sure.
And for other reasons as well. Mm-hmm. So in the movie, Rambo and Teasel are both still alive at the end.
Teasel falls through the roof after he gets shot in the leg, but he's alive.
Yeah, he's alive.
He's just injured.
Yeah. We see him on the gurney, on the stretcher, being put in the ambulance. Now in the book, both of them die. Rambo shoots Teasel, and then Rambo gets shot by Troutman. And then Teasel dies after that from the bullet that Rambo shot.
Yeah.
And I think that ending works for the book. But I also think that given what the movie changes about both characters and the way that they interact with each other, the movie's ending is also brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think given the slightly different directions that each story takes, both endings work equally well and are equally tragic, just for different reasons.
I agree completely. And so the movie's ending, like you said, or like we mentioned earlier, is that Rambo just he breaks down in front of Troutman after Teasel's injured, and then basically we don't even see it, but after he breaks down, we just see him walking out of the police station under arrest, and he just gave up. Basically, he's just he's just done. He's spent, and he gives up, and he's arrested. And then the movie just ends. There's no denouement. There's no post credit. And then Rambo went to rehabilitation, and then blah blah. Was living happily on a
Samuel L. Jackson shows up and says, "I'm here to talk to you." About
the movie does slightly ruin it by having a terrible credits song that tonally does not fit.
I was so thrown.
It does not fit. That movie, the ending, the thing is that the ending of the movie is really good, and it would be so much better if it just, he walked out under arrest, and then it cut, and then it ended, and then it just faded to black, and the credits rolled over nothing.
Yeah.
Or a somber song, but it plays
it freeze frames on him.
It freeze frames and plays a like a fun. It's not fun, but it's like a weird
like
80s ballad-y thing.
Yeah.
It's very strange. It to me, it totally did not make any sense. But so that's the ending. That's the ending of Rambo the movie. There is an alternate ending that was filmed, and I think it's really interesting. And you can actually watch it on YouTube if you search Rambo or First Blood alternate ending. You can find it on YouTube and watch it. I assume it's probably on one of the special features or something on a DVD or Blu-ray. And in that, from my understanding, everything happens pretty much the same. But at the end, he walks after he breaks down in front of Troutman. He walks up to Troutman and says and basically asks Troutman to kill him. Mm-hmm. And he pulls Troutman's gun out and gives it to him, or pulls a gun out and hands it to Troutman and basically begs him to kill him. And Troutman is pointing the gun at him and seems to be considering it, but then doesn't. He pulls the gun away to like put it away, and Rambo grabs it and pulls it and shoots himself, like while Troutman's holding it. Mm-hmm. And he falls over and he dies. And Troutman walks out and the movie ends. And that scene, or that ending is, as I was watching the movie, I was like thinking that something like that should be the ending. Mm-hmm. And it's a brutal ending. It's closer to the book.
Yeah.
Or so does Troutman just actively shoot him, or does
he actively shoots him?
Okay,
yeah.
To like stop him, or okay,
basically.
Okay, because in the book, so the movie changes that alternate movie ending changes it slightly so that Rambo's responsible and kills himself essentially. But I thought that was a really it's a brutal ending, and it would have been a whole different movie. And now obviously part of the reason they didn't do that is if they can't make sequels if he's dead.
Yeah,
but.
Gotta get that money.
I kind of like that ending, but I also kind of prefer the movie's actual ending of him just being arrested and taken away. Mm-hmm. If they had never made a sequel. But, and part of that reason is because what we discussed earlier, the fact that Rambo doesn't kill anybody. Mm-hmm. He's not like a lost cause, as we see in the movie. Yeah. He's not like he's kind of a broken, he's definitely a broken person, but he's not a lost cause. Like I said, he at the beginning of the movie, he's living in society. He's trying to do his best. He's doing his thing, but he gets pushed and then breaks and then snaps. But even when he snaps in the movie, he doesn't snap so far that he just kills anybody. And we even have a particular scene in the movie that we didn't talk about where he comes across a kid hunting or something like that, and has a chance to kill him but doesn't, and then that kid ends up like directing the cops to him or whatever. But so we see that he's not like completely lost, and I think that thematically it makes more sense in the movie to not have him kill himself, even though in the moment in the movie I kind of thought that would make the most sense. When I thought about it more, I think the movie's ending of him just giving up makes more thematic sense than him killing himself. I know they're both kind of quote unquote giving up in a sense, but I think him turning himself in feels better as a film, or feels better as a not solution, resolution. Add a syllable, as a resolution for the film, but also just makes more sense for his character in the changes that they made in the movie. Whereas if maybe in the book when he is just murdering everybody, and he is just. The book's version is more of a commentary on the system and what it does to people, and he's the example for you as a reader. Look what we do to soldiers and what we make them become. Mm-hmm. Feel bad about it. Now he's dead. Feel bad. Whereas the movie is like that, but also maybe we can help them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like they're not monsters. We can help them. So I think there's a good message in both of those. Yeah. Like the book leans a little harder and is a little more like coming at you with it, or like is a little more critical of the society as a whole. Whereas the movie does that, but is also trying to make sure that we're not demonizing soldiers, like in a, you know what I mean? Like it's trying to. So I think they're both really good, and I like the movie's ending. The alternate ending also could work. I don't hate it, but it's just different. So yeah, those are the endings they're all have their merits in their different contexts. So
No, yeah, absolutely.
all right, final verdict. Let's do it.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
Okay, I want to preface my final verdict since we talked about Teasel being a Korean vet.
Yeah.
And like how I may have not known to like read into that aspect of it. So if you read the book, if you like the book, potentially I got a different read on it than you did. So, but I think that can also be a mark of good writing and good storytelling when you can get different reads on things. So, I felt a little bit torn for my final verdict on this one. I think both mediums set out to achieve something pretty similar, which is to highlight the plight of the Vietnam vet, but they approach it from slightly different angles. I think the movie's choice to make Rambo more sympathetic is a good one. In the book, he's not exactly not sympathetic, but he does kill a lot of people. We get a lot of his inner monologue about how he feels himself sliding back into his old mindset of just like killing indiscriminately, which is a great jab at the war complex, but maybe not so great for endearing an audience to a character. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And while the book doesn't necessarily sympathize with Teasel, we do get a lot of his backstory. We find out what makes him tick. So while he is still a dick and arguably the villain of the story, he's much more multi-dimensional rather than the kind of one-dimensional villain that we get in the movie. So when I read it, I felt like what the book set up was almost like a Shakespearean tragedy. Rambo and Teasel are at odds with one another, but they also have a lot in common. And if it wasn't for a handful of factors, this story could have had a happy ending, which is what a tragedy is.
Yeah.
If Rambo had been able to communicate what he had been through, or if Teasel had stopped to empathize and find out what his story was, maybe they could have gotten along. Maybe they could have even been friends.
Yeah. Yeah, you get that feeling, and you get a little bit in the movie, but it sounds like the book does it a lot better, is that, yes, 100%, it's an indictment of the system because both of these people are very similar, but in different ways.
Yes.
And they just can't see how similar they are, and it's fascinating, and it's really good, and I think the movie does it well in different ways. But I agree.
So the movie also gives us a tragedy, albeit a slightly different one. The movie gives us a more sympathetic war vet and a more stock character villain, which effectively broadens the scope of the story from two tragically flawed individuals to a tragically flawed system.
Yeah. One
that doesn't take care of its veterans and puts bullies into positions of power.
Mm-hmm.
I think both stories are interesting in different ways. I think the version that is still awfully salient and relevant today is the movie. And for that reason, I'm going to give this one to the movie.
There you go. Woo! I can't disagree. I think this movie is completely... I think that was one of the things that also most impressed me about the film, not to get into anything along here before we wrap up, was how salient it still is as a film. It just felt like it had so much still to say about power dynamics and police and authority and, like I said at the beginning, obedience and trauma. It feels like it'll be eternally timeless or timely.
How much we do not learn.
Yeah, it just feels like it'll be eternally timely, and it's one of those movies that when you if you literally shot for shot remade it, and obviously you shouldn't do this, but if you shot for shot remade it today, it would still make just as much sense to like a modern audience. I think you could tweak a few things, but I think that it would still just be just as important of a film as it is, or a modern version would still just be resonate as much with audiences as it did in 1970 whatever.
And I would implore you, if you are listening to this and you have not seen First Blood, and you, like we did, only have this idea
100%.
of Rambo that comes from our cultural mythology of him, please watch this movie.
Yeah.
Please.
You know, and it's interesting because it's not dissimilar from Rocky.
Yeah.
In that regard, is that Rocky, you know, you get all the sequels and then you get the cultural idea of what Rocky is and you think it's just a dumb boxing movie. And the first Rocky movie is not just a dumb boxing movie. And it's been a long time since I've seen Rocky, but I think it's similar in that regard. We get the sort of cultural idea of what this character, Rocky or Rambo, is. And the original movies that those characters both come from have a lot more to say.
Yeah.
And are a lot more poignant and meaningful and just interesting than we as a society give them credit for.
Than just big tough guy.
Yeah.
Blows up things or punches things.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Brilliant. All right. Woo! That's it. That's our First Blood episode. I'm going to say this now. That's the best episode we've done in a while. Just throwing that out there. You can agree or disagree, but really enjoyed that. As always, you can do us a giant favor. You can head on over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit and support us for as much or little money as you can. And we mentioned at the beginning, not going to go over what you get at all those levels. Just head over to Patreon. You can check that stuff out. You get bonus content. We're actually... within the next day or so after this episode comes out, we'll be putting out a bonus patron-only episode where we discuss New Girl, Lost Girl, and a little bit of Schitt's Creek. Very drunk. We recorded that a week or two ago. It's edited. I'm going to put it out Thursday or Friday this week after this episode comes out on Wednesday. And if you're a $5 patron or up, you get access to our bonus content, and that is one of the episodes. So if you've seen New Girl, if you've seen Lost Girl and want to talk about that, or want to hear us talk about that, you can check out that bonus episode. I will preface this for our patrons here. I'm also going to put a disclaimer on the episode. We were both quite tipsy, me in particular, little drunk during that episode. I edited it down quite a bit, so it's more listenable than it would have been, shall we say. But if that's, but it was still a lot of fun, and we talked a lot about a lot of things, lots of themes throughout some different shows and discussions of sexuality and that sort of thing, which was, I thought, interesting. You were way more
I'm going to have to listen to this because I remember us having a nice conversation.
Oh, it was nice. I was just repeating myself a lot. And now I will say in the episode, after I edited it, I cut it out. I cut out myself repeating myself a lot. But listening back on that one, I mean, we recorded that at like 1 a.m. or something. And I cut a lot of me repeating myself out. So anyways, you can check that out on our Patreon feed. If you can't support us, we understand and we still appreciate you. Thanks for listening. You can do us a giant favor. You can head to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. It's very helpful to us. It bumps us up in the I don't even know. It doesn't. It does something. It's helpful. So leave
algorithms.
Us, algorithms. Do something on iTunes. That'll be helpful. Katie, what's next?
So up next, we are doing a listener's choice. This is something that I've wanted to do for a while. Mm-hmm. We are going to be talking about a Disney fairy tale. So I've mentioned before on the show, fairy tales are kind of my oeuvre. Mm-hmm. They're my wheelhouse.
Yep.
I did a collection of fairy tales for my master's thesis project.
Yes, you did.
And this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. We might need to revisit some of our usual segments. I don't know if they'll all work.
Probably not.
But at any rate, we have polls up right now on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram asking you guys to choose a movie for us. I put a longer list out for our patrons, and they helped us narrow down the field to 3. So our choices right now are Beauty and the Beast, Tangled, and Frozen. And I believe right now Tangled is in the lead.
Although it's a very tight competition. I think Beauty and the Beast is also fairly close still.
Yeah, they're kind of neck and neck.
Beating out Frozen. But if you're listening and you want to go sway that vote, you have how long?
I will announce that on Sunday.
So they have till Saturday?
Yes,
they
have till Saturday, okay. So I'll announce the winner on Sunday.
If you're listening to this when it comes out, you have till Saturday, so you have like 3 or 4 days. Head to our Facebook or Twitter Or if you're on Instagram, you can comment and we'll count that too. But Twitter and Facebook have the polls. And go ahead and vote on there, and then we will announce the winner and on the next prequel episode. And you'll know what we're doing. So that'll be fun. I've seen all those movies, of course, obviously.
We've watched all those movies together.
Yeah, we've watched all those movies together. But I am interested to see. I voted for Beauty and the Beast. Not to sway anybody.
I voted for Beauty and the Beast as well, not to sway anyone. If Tangled wins, I won't be mad.
No. I wouldn't be mad if any of them win. I like Frozen quite a bit too. I just think, to me, I'm more interested. One, I will say this. This is a little bit of a swaying. I would like to hear Katie talk about Beauty and the Beast because she's got feelings. So
I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about the way that the story gets reinterpreted in modernity.
Yes.
A lot of thoughts.
Yes. So that's my only sort of 2 cents into how you should vote, is that Katie has feelings
It'll
about
just be an hour of me
Beauty
going
and the
off.
Beast. So if you want to hear Katie rant, vote for Beauty and the Beast. But she also has opinions about the other ones. And
yes.
We'll be happy to do any of them. So go ahead and check that out on all of our social media and vote. That's it. Until next time, guys, gals, non-binary, and everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.